Hey folks, Quilly18 here, and welcome to another episode of our Unity base building game series, codenamed Project Porcupine. And can you believe this is episode 70? 70 episodes! I mean, I'm impressed when we get to episode 70 of a game, but we have been programming regularly for 70 of these episodes, which is just absolutely unbelievable to me. We're currently in process of making our new file saving system. So let's say we have our game over here and we have some sort of world. I can hit the save button and we get a save dialog box that comes up. It asks for a file name and I can say this is called test 123. I hit OK and it has saved it out to this folder over here. We had the my file 123 from last time, and here's test 123 from this time around here. Great stuff. Now, what we're going to do is, well, three things, I don't know, many things we're doing today. One, we're going to change the load button to do that, because right now the load still just tries to load from the user prefs built into the Unity, as opposed to, oh, I think I remember now. You remember last episode when I hit the load button and I was getting an error instead of loading anything and I couldn't figure out why? It's because I changed, over here in Edit, Project Settings, Player, because I changed the, I think it was the project name, but I set the company name and product name. That actually, this determines the name of the sort of internal file that Unity uses to save your player prefs. And so by changing that, I broke it. So there's no game to load on that load button right now, because the player prefs file is basically empty now. But we're gonna improve that to have a pop-up anyway. Now, one of the things we did last time is because World Controller was responsible for initiating the file saving before, over here, we still have this code in here. But I've realized, I think this doesn't belong in World Controller. Because, I mean, well, it sort of kind of does. It's fair. World Controller might do more stuff. And ultimately, and I've said this before, it's better to have very, very short and simple functions. It's also better to have very short and simple classes that do one thing and one thing only, as opposed to having these big monolithic classes that do a bunch of different stuffs. So I think, with that in mind, I think I would like a new controller over here, and I would like to have this be called save file, or file save controller. File save controller. Like that. Okay? And in here, I would like this to be the thing responsible for initiating the file saving and loading. Now, the actual serialization is still the responsibility of the world data object and the tile data object and so on and so forth. But the user interactivity side of it should be part of this controller. So what I'm going to do, in the world controller here, I'm going to grab, it actually might make sense to have this be part of the world controller, or some other sort of centralized thing. I'm going to keep it here. I'm going to make this a public. That's going to be fine. I'm going to keep that as a public here in World Controller. But the save dialog, OK, was clicked, and the save world button, we're going to grab these, cut them out, and we're going to copy them into, we might need to start. We're not going to need an update, I don't think. We're going to paste them into here. Which means, actually, we're not going to need a reference to the save file dialog box anymore, which is kind of nifty. Yeah, that's true. Because what's going to happen here is save file dialog box is just going to be this. Or technically like this game object. This dot game object, which I mean, I know we don't need the this for. So actually, I guess we'll get rid of that. We'll just do this. Boom. Like so. And we need to say using dot UI. And actually, we're going to need, we'll just save ourselves a little bit of typing here, because we're going to need the I/O and the serialization. I guess so. Basically, we'll be pulling all the XML stuff out of here. I'll just copy it for now, because otherwise the save function, or the load functions are going to complain. I'm going to put that in. And then we're left with this part over here. So what we need to do is grab the world controller dot instance dot file save base path. And dot world dot base path dot base path. Okay, so now this will all complain without any questions anymore, and this should be okay. Oh, so we don't need a reference to the file save dialog box at all. And what happens if we try to compile this? Oh, we have a reference to it. Oh, show save dialog. Go away. You go here instead. And so again, it's gameObject.setActive to be true. And in fact, what I'm thinking is this might be a good idea for us. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to create another class over here under controller. Actually, that might be under UI or something like that. We'll put it here. We'll probably move things around a little bit later. But what if we can set up some sort of thing called Dialog Box Controller? Right? Open this up. And the idea being that our file save controller actually derives from that. So then we could have here, instead of show save dialog, right? Hell, we can get rid of all these comments and whatnot. We can just put in this function here. Make this a virtual so that our children can override it. And basically, we are just saying show dialog is this, and a close dialog is that. But our children might want to overwrite this in case they need to set some things up. And in fact, that's exactly what's going to happen here. We're going to have something like a public override void. It was letting me autocomplete a second ago. Show dialog. Oh, there we go. Just tab complete it. So we override it there. So we'll call the base version first, which makes this visible. Build file list here, like that. So I like this idea. And then we can, our file load dialog box can be the same thing. In fact, the dialog box controller might have a bunch of utility functions, right? Imagine utility functions, something like protected, so our children can call it, string array, get list of files, string path, string filter. But really, that's just a single function. So well, all we're going to be calling is directory.getFiles, which is just a one-liner anyway. So, well, we want to do some validation and things, but it's really, it's pretty simple, so that's okay. So build file list here, do something like that. So to get our things working back the way they were a moment ago, there should be no compile errors anymore. I forgot to save this file. There we go. There's no compile errors anymore, but it won't work right now. Well, I mean, we could run it, but the big thing is when we hit save, nothing is happening. And the reason for that is our save button was trying to call a function on world controller, but that's not going to be the case anymore. Instead, what we have to do is we have to add the, on our save file dialog box, I'm going to add the file save controller. And then our button will actually send a message to the save file dialog box and say, hey, could you please show the dialog? There you go. So when we hit save, it just shows the save dialog box. One thing we'll want to do later on is make it so that when certain types of dialog boxes are open, the game will pause. And in fact, make it so that the game doesn't even take any input anymore. So we don't have that right now. So let's say I did this, and I open the save dialog box. I mean, I can still do this. I can still pan around. I can still ask our character to go and build things. There we go, or characters, in fact. So the game is still running in the background. So obviously, we're going to want to put in some sort of pause. But now, I think, no, it's not working because this OK button won't do anything. If we do that, and I check my saves, yeah, nothing is happening. And why is that? Because the OK button used to try to call a function on, again, the world controller. So we're just going to have it reference its own dialog box, and this is going to be the save dialog OK was clicked. And if we hit cancel, then all it's going to do is, oh, actually cancel was already working because it was just calling disable, right? It was setting set active to false on the dialog box, which does still work to hide it, but what I think we're going to do is instead make sure that we're calling the close dialog function, which just sets the dialog box to disabled, but this way it gives us a chance to hook in other things. Maybe when we close a dialog box, well, we need to make sure to unpause the game, for example, right? And maybe do other kind of cleanup behaviors, and now that will be the case as long as we keep that convention. Call show dialog box, call close dialog box, and then scripts that are derived from that can customize that behavior even more. If we don't need any real special behavior on a dialog box, other than maybe showing a message, then we could literally just use the base Dialog Box Controller. That's okay. But we can make derived classes if we need to. So now if we hit play, make some sort of world, hit save, hit OK, that closes, and if we check here, there we go. I've just created that. Wonderful. All right, so that is better off. But we're not quite done yet, because what I want to do, if we undisable this, we want to populate the file list over here with stuff. Right? We want to have a list of files in here that so we know what's already in there. We want to be able to scroll up and down in this list, and we want to be able to click on one of them. And what it's going to do when we click on a file in the list, it's going to populate the file name in this part over here, so we can just hit OK and overwrite it. And of course, if we are overwriting a file, when we hit OK, there should be sort of a sub-dialog box that opens and says, are you sure this is what you want to do? You know, are you sure you want to override this file? Which is groovy. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's just work in the UI layer right now and work on a scrolling list, which we haven't actually done in this series yet. So we get a chance to look at how that works. So a scrolling list in the Unity UI system is a little bit wonky to get right. So basically, we have this background, which is also going to act as the sort of overall border of our list, sort of a mask going on. We're going to do that. And inside of that, we're going to have some sort of object, which this is the list container. And then inside of that, we have some list items. So this list container, let's have it be as big as the other thing. We'll change that later on. And then inside of that, we're going to create, I guess I'm going to create an empty here, which is going to then have a text element. So this is some file name in here. And so this would really have a fixed height based on our font. So something kind of like that. And we'll have it just aligned in the middle because it might be a little easier. And so this is a file list item. And I guess this would be something like file list. And then we're going to have many, many items in here, right? We're going to have multiple files in there. And on file list, it should be pretty simple to recognize. What we're going to want is a vertical layout group that lays out the files automatically vertically over here. And that is most of it. Now, obviously, we don't want just these duplicates. We actually want probably some sort of prefab. We don't actually have to use a prefab for this. This file list item is going to be simple enough. We could build it programmatically. But for now, let's go ahead and make it a prefab. I'll make it a little easier to manage. And that's in there. We want it to be, I guess we want this to actually be stretched the full size of the thing. There we go. And this file list item gets duplicated, so that if we apply this and we duplicate this again, there we go. That looks mostly better. So we want this sort of list. Well, two things. One, we don't want this huge gap between items. We want them really to be stacked up at the top. And the second thing is, why did the stuff just disappear? Well, it's because by default, we have our text over here is set that if we overflow vertically, we truncate it. If we allow it to overflow, then we'll see our items again. But it's still the problem that stuff's sort of overlapping and squooshing together. Obviously, the file dialog box, each one of these items, the size of the items shouldn't be scaled to occupy 100% of the list. Instead, they should be kind of fixed in size. And there are a couple of ways to do that. We could put out a layout element on here and specify certain things about the size. That is absolutely one way of doing it. There's also some hints that we can provide in the vertical layout group here to sort of, say, prevent child expansion, different things like that. But one of the strongest things we can do, the easiest things we can do, is simply on this file list, scale its length, its size, so that it's appropriate for the number of children. So we figure out that really we want our children to have, 24 pixels high each one. So the size of file list should be number of children multiplied by 24. As it turns out, we actually have a script that we already made for that, for our little our list of menu items. If we put automatic vertical size on our file list over here, and we say that we want a child height of 2016, 14. This feels like it's not paying attention. Top left corner. Oh, there we go. I think it was because of the anchors. Hold on, let's try that again. There we are. Yeah, and that feels good. Anyway, so we're going to pick a size that feels kind of okay. Does that feel kind of okay? Kind of the right amount of space vertically? I think that's okay. And then if we scale, if we delete a bunch of these items, boop, and we start duplicating again, there, that feels right. So now the file list changes its height to be appropriate for the number of children within, and then everything arranges itself pretty comfortably. This is also going to be very important for when we actually get scrolling in here. So how does scrolling work? Well, let me back up a sec here. On the parent, we definitely want a mask. So by throwing a mask on here, we say that your children, anything that sticks out past the graphics, the mask requires that you have an image. Okay? You don't have to show the image. If you toggle this, it will no longer show the image. But it uses the image here as the information for when to clip the child stuff over here. So nothing outside of this graphic will show. All right, so now that we've got the mask, what we need is a scroll rect. The scroll rect is the script, which honestly, you could have written yourself, but Unity UI system provides one for us. This is the code that controls whether something scrolls or not. And I actually don't know if it matters exactly what object the scroll rect is on. Typically, you put it on the ultimate container, which in this case is this file list background, the thing with the mask. But I don't think it actually matters what object it's on, because what it really needs is it needs this content field to be filled in. So it's the file list, which is the content. And I think, do we have to specify the viewport? I guess we do, because the viewport is ourselves. So if I hit play now, do I need to set up hitbox? Ah, there you go. Now I can scroll around. Just by clicking and dragging, I can drag this view around. Whee! Excellent. Good. Now, clearly you could see right away that there's one issue in that I can scroll left and right, which we don't want. So we just go ahead and disable the horizontal scrolling. So it only scrolls vertically at this point. And you can tune some of the sensitivity over there. In fact, scroll sensitivity is the middle mouse button over here. It always starts off quite low. You'll probably want to crank that up for the mouse wheel scrolling. Obviously, you can see that the background is doing stuff when we do that. So again, it's a sign that when our dialog box is open, the rest of the game should check that. There should be a universal flag of two things. One, there should be a flag if the game itself is paused or not. And in fact, the game we may want speed control, right? Pause, normal speed, fast speed, super fast speed. So that's one thing, but there should be another flag as well, because when the game is paused, we may still want to be able to, pan around and zoom in and out. But there should be another flag that tells the main system that ignore input, which is a couple of ways of doing that. We can check to see if we're hovering over another UI element, which might be a thing, which we don't do right now. And if we do that, actually, if we put like sort of a transparent background as part of this dialog box, if there was a background that occupied the entire screen and so overlapped all the other buttons, that would make sure the other buttons literally wouldn't do anything. We probably want to do that, actually, to stop this sort of hover effect, for example, when you've got a dialog box open. In fact, you might not want that background, that fake background here, to be invisible. You might want it to be semi-transparent. If it's a black background that's set to like 25% opacity, what it does is it dims everything else, which is actually kind of cool and probably what we should do. Should we do it now? Sure, let's do it now, actually. So our save file dialog box here. What are we going to do? We have to change this source image. We have to change a couple of things. What we have to do is basically make a new parent. Take this entire, where is it? This here, in there. Save file dialog, like that. Actually, hold on. I can do this slightly more comfortably. So we're going to create, I just backed up there. We're going to create an image here. This is actually something that you should probably do more often as a habit. Right now, our save dialog itself. This is the whole dialog box, right? Toggle on and off. Well, it has an image component for its background in there. What you should actually do, it'll save you a lot of trouble, is not use that. Okay? Is not use that there. Instead, use this part over here. So, and this becomes sort of your true size of your object, and then everything goes in there. So this is something like dialog background, and then we can take everything in here. Is this game object a thing? No, this object is not a thing. Go away. Take all of this and feed it in there. And this thing here is our image. So again, what image did we use for this? Background. So set background here. We will set the same sort of general size. So we've got that and that. And you're centered. Why is it a different size? We'll fix that in a second. And so what we do here for the actual save dialog background box, what we do is we remove the sprite, so it's just a pure white square. But we actually set it to black, full screen, and then what we do is we lower the opacity. So you can see how it dims everything else. And that's very, very, very strong. So yeah, I think we have to tell everything else to be parented properly again. So stretch at the top of this box. The file list background should fill the whole... There we go. That's the big thing that was in the way. And then give us the top border and a bottom border over here. There we go. When we change the parent, the anchors broke. There we go. So yeah, we'll just have to reset this a second. File name is stretched to the bottom, and it was something like padding of 4. Oops, 4, and this would be what, -4? No, 4, and the right side needs some padding for the buttons. The OK button goes up by 4 pixels and moves to the left somewhere like that. And the OK button. Sorry about that. Should have. See, this is one of the reasons you do it first. And this goes -4 that way. Move the OK button a little bit more. And the file name. Something like that. Okay, great. So then you have your save file dialog box over here, which has the dark background, grays everything out. And the advantage of doing this is now none of the buttons here respond to anything. Now, we still respond to mouse scrolling because we're not checking for that, but there's no hover. This button is the modal dialog box that takes over everything else, which is great. And then you have the background there, and this actually sets your size for the box and so on and so forth. So things tend to do a little bit better. This should probably be called something like title. File name, okay. All right, good. All right, so we've got the file list background now. That just feels much, much, much stronger than before. And we're still in the position where we can sort of drag this around by dragging the background, which is good. All right, so now that we've got that dark background, what we really would like is a scroll bar, because these lists, I mean, technically this is fine. This is fully functional, but what a non-standard sort of UI thing. People really, really want a scroll bar, even if they just end up mouse wheeling up and down the list, which honestly, this rate is driving me crazy. Let's increase the scroll sensitivity to like 10. How does that work for us? There we go. That feels a little bit better. And again, I should turn off the zooming in the background because it's kind of distracting, and I admit that. But that feels better. So this is fully functional. I mean, we don't have any responses to click yet, but that's very easy to put in. So we don't need a scroll bar. But A, scroll bar is nice to be able to actually use, and B, scroll bar shows you where in the list you are. So it's really an important thing to do. So how do we get a scroll bar? Well, first, we need a little bit of space for it. So my background over here, I'm going to give it some padding over on the right. I don't know, about that much. That's probably enough space for a scroll bar. And depending on how we built this object, especially in terms of having a mask, that will determine if we put the scroll bar as a child of the file list background. Currently, we can't. If we go and make a image over here, so we're on our image, but it gets clipped to our mask. So we're not actually seeing the white of the image over here. It becomes more obvious if we add a UI sprite element on it. So we've actually got a border right? You can see here, we can see it perfectly fine. But as soon as it reaches the edge, it gets clipped by the mask. You can see it in particular in the game view here. So obviously, we're not going to have it as a child of the background. Instead, we're going to have it a child of the dialog background itself instead of the file list. And this is going to be called our, well, I guess we'll call it scroll bar, like this. And then what I think we can do is glue it over on the right-hand side of the screen, and then just drag it to be about that wide and about that tall, and something like that over there. That seems good. I'm then going to go, I'm like the background a little bit darker to help with the next step. So this is the scroll bar, which is fine, but obviously the scroll bar by itself doesn't really do much. It needs that little widget that goes up and down, which is really just another image inside of it, which again, I will go ahead and give this sort of UI sprite kind of look. And, you know, it's going to be something that's going to have a certain size, like that. It's starting to look, that's kind of looking a little bit like a scroll bar. So how do we get the actual functionality to work? So this is going to be it's the handle of the scroll bar. Well, on the scroll bar itself, we can add a script called scroll bar, like this. And it wants to know what the handle rectangle is. So we drag the handle in there. That's all good and fine. It goes a little wonky here. We're gonna fix that in just a second. Don't you worry about it. Actually, I guess we could do it now. If we go in here and we hold Alt and Shift and do that, there we go. Now it's gonna put our handle in the right place. But right now, our scroll bar has no idea what it's supposed to scroll and what the relative size of things are. If we go back to our file list background over here, which is our scroll rect, it has a field in here for vertical scroll bar. So if we take our vertical scroll bar and just drop it in there, now there's going to be that connection between the two. You'll notice things have gone a little bit weird. What's going on here? Let's hit play and see what happens. If I scroll around this list, scroll bar is, for whatever reason, the default is horizontal. And I mean, obviously there are horizontal scroll bars, but like 90% of scroll bars are vertical, aren't they? Seems like a really odd default choice. So we have to go to the scroll bar and say, your job is actually not scroll left to right, but bottom to top. Bottom to top is what we're looking for. And then when you do that, all the sizes get screwed up. I don't know why that is. I have no clue. But yeah, so the sizes get all screwed up. And why is it? Because the width goes negative here for some reason. Why does the width go negative? I don't know. So it's like, I don't know, be about 24 wide or something, or you know what, I'm just going to go and refix you up here. I don't know why it does that. But it do. So there you go. So I'll put you here somewhere like that. Actually, we will go and... There we go, add a nice little border. The handle is fine. The handle resizes properly, but for some reason when you switch that, it messes something up. All right, so now that looks about better. Note, I would have thought, by default, I would have thought top to bottom is what you're looking at. It must have something to do with the anchor position. But I would have thought top to bottom is how you want to scroll, because it's like, yeah, you want the thing to be at the top. But it's not. This would actually do the opposite of what you're looking for. So do make sure that you go bottom to top, and then after you set your direction, make sure your anchor's okay. I probably just have something wonky about where I anchor the thing as the base. But now, it means I can grab this and scrub, and everything works the way you kind of expect. So now I'm looking at the bottom of the list, now I'm looking at the top of the list, and I can mouse wheel through here, and everything is groovy. That was very, very, very easy to do. We are going to finish this off with the last bit of behavior, which is that our file list item over here, when we click on it, we want it to do something. So I guess... I don't want this to be file list item. This is going to be a semi-generic kind of script. This is going to be something like list dialog list item is what I want. So this is a script. It's going to belong probably inside of UI. Come on, drag, drag, drag. There it is. Right, and you're here, and let me apply so that this gets locked into the prefab. So there's a couple of different ways to implement the click behavior. What we could do, right, one of the ways that we've worked before is we could make file list item into a button. We could actually add a button script and have it do something or whatever. But I want to minimize how many components are on here. Plus, if I added, so if I made this a button, what I would have to do is on click, I would have to say, tell yourself to do something, right, from my dialog list item, or something kind of awkward like that. Whereas it's much better if I just have this dialog list item script component on here and have it respond to the click. Now, there is, you might be like, well, can I do something like on mouse down or on click or different things like that? The best way to do it with the UI is actually to include Unity Engine.EventSystems and promise to implement. We're going to implement the pointer click handler. So we're going to add an interface over here, and if I right click and say implement interface, and yes, that's fine. That's such a weird little error, probably based on stuff I did before. So to implement pointer click handler, we have to have this function, and by doing this, Unity will make sure that we get told when we get clicked. Let's go debug.log error, which is kind of what the exception throwing would have been. Come on. Blah, 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 blah. Let's see what that happens. This should be all we have to do. I don't think I'm lying to you. Let's find out. If I hit play, and over here, I mean, we can still scroll up and down and everything. If I click on one of these, there you go. We're getting messages. So now we know when we're being clicked. So this is the best way to do it with the UI system, to have a script that really is aware of things like this. There's a bunch of these that do very little things. Sometimes you want a whole series of these. Like if you want to respond to like mouse over commands and different things like that, there's pointer click or pointer enter handler and pointer leave handler and all these different things. So look at those. So what we want to do when we click is I want to our job is to take our text label and copy it into a target field. That's what I want this to do. When we click on this, I want it to populate the file name. So what we're going to do is we're going to add so file name is an input, right? File name over here is an input field, which is part of the UI system. So we have to say using Unity Engine.UI. So we want a public, what is it, text field? No, text input. Input field. Input field. All right, public input field, which obviously we need to link over here. We're going to figure out more of this in a second. So that links to there. Excellent. And we don't need a start or an update or anything like that. It's when we get clicked, what we're going to do is we can get component in children. We have somewhere in our children, it's actually our first child over here. Come on, expand. We have a game object called text, but it has a text component. And we want to get the text component out of there, and specifically the text itself. And we want to put that in the input field. Input field dot text. Like that. So that's what happens if we click. We want that to happen. Does this work? Well, let's find out. We're going to hit play. Now, only the first one has that padded out. If we click on these, nothing happens. We get a null reference. But the first one here, all the pointers are set up. So if we click, it pastes it in there. Excellent. So there we go. That's what the behavior we want on this thing, which is great. Now, I'm going to clear this out. Like that. We still have our one reference one. So the next step is going to be to populate this list with the actual list of files in our save file folder. Make sure that the file list item gets linked to the proper input field and that it's got the right file name loaded in there so that when we click on it, it does that. And that's going to be the job of the file save controller over here. We're going to build the file list here. So we're going to need a link to, oops, you actually want a public game object file list item prefab, like so. And so we want to get list of files in save location, build file list by instantiating file list prefab, and well, and that's that. That's the whole set of things. So we're going to have to continue this next time. Building the scroll box took a little bit longer than I thought. And then finally we'll get around to making load dialog box work as well. But it's the file load controller is very much going to be It's actually going to be a little bit simpler than some of these, because we don't even need the a text box you can edit. But no, it's basically going to be kind of a copy and paste of the file save control over here. And they're going to be able to save quite a bit of code, or copy a lot of code from one another, or, you know, have some of the code moved as a utility function dialog box controller. So that's going to go very quick. But there we go. We've got a dialog box that opens up, that takes control over the screen. We could, that might be a thing we want to do here, is let's say we have so in our world controller, this is probably a good place to have our state. Something like, let's have it be an enum thing. Let's not worry about speed for now. Let's just have a boolean, is paused, equals false, bool is interactable. Or is modal, actually might be good, equals false. If true, a modal dialog box is open, so normal inputs should be ignored. I suppose we could have this be a public property, or we could have a function. Let's make this a public property. That's going to be okay. Is paused, and actually if it's a boolean, they'll default to false, so that's going to be okay. Right now, we're not going to make it, like, you know, get set or something like that. Like, we don't need to do that. Technically, it's just a variable right now, but we're ready for it being a property later on. So is modal, and that, and we'll make it public. But later on, these will probably be functions that do more stuff, do a little bit of sanity checking, or something to that effect. So, for example, here in our update, we can say if is paused is equal to false, then we update the world. Boom. Something like that. So in our dialog box controller, when we show the dialog, what we're going to do is we're going to say world controller dot instance dot is modal is equal to true. And probably want to pause as well. But some things may not pause. I don't know. We might set it so that if you set modal to be equal to true, then is pause returns true, or something of that nature. Or tell you what we can do, this is a good case, is equal to false. What we're going to change is world controller. Over here is paused. We're going to, the set is fine. We just set, set is perfectly fine. We don't have to do anything special for it. But for the get, we're going to say if is modal is equal to false, then return false. And we can really go and group these together. How do I want to do it? One-liner? I guess that's probably fine. Yeah, so we'll do a, so we have a private, I mean, I don't really have to say private, but let's say, or protected or whatever. So let's assume there's a, so we do have the internal boolean of is pause that we're not supposed to mess with. Let's make it private. Ack. Sorry, it's a little disorganized because I wasn't actually planning on adding this in. So if you set pause, you just say is paused is equal to whatever the value is. That's okay. But when we get it and we want to find out if something is paused or not, what we return, we could just return is paused, right? True or false. But what I want to say is, we need to make sure that we only return true if is paused is true and is modal is false. Because if we're paused, then we can return true. Sorry. Or. There we go. So we are paused if is paused is true, or if is modal is true. There we go. If we're paused or we're modal, then we're paused. So just setting is modal equal true also pauses the game at the same time. But we don't have to do both. So now in our dialog box controller, we just say that tell the world that we've gone to a modal mode or have exited it, and that's that. What we actually want to do, later on, we're actually going to want is modal to be a counter because we could have nested modal boxes. Oh, I'm getting a little ahead of myself over here. What a crappy video. I'm terribly sorry that I'm all over the place on this one. I'm trying to think about too many things and how do we coordinate things and how do we explain things and just doing a terrible job of doing all that. We don't need a starter update over here in Dialog Box Controller. We can trim that down a wee bit, which is going to be good. But yeah, that'll work. And then the whole reason to do this is to then go into our, not resources, into our mouse controller. And in our mouse controller, we have our update function over here, and we can say something like if world controller dot instance dot is modal, return. A modal dialog is open, so don't process any game inputs from the mouse, which should all mean that. Let's just hide this properly to start off with. Boom. Hit play. If I hit save, it opens the modal dialog box, and now, can you hear my mouse wheel spinning? There's no zooming happening. In fact, if I click and do anything like that, we're not dragging the world around. If I cancel, then it works again. Hit save. Modal. Nothing is happening. And in fact, the characters in the background won't be doing anything either. If I hit play, and I turn on the pathfinding test, and then I say build a stockpile over here, the characters are going to start walking as soon as I let go of the mouse. And I hit save. Now they're not walking anymore. The game has been paused. We are not processing anything because a modal dialog box is open. Cancel, they go. Save, they don't. Hey, good stuff. All right, so we still need to populate that list. We'll do that next time. Thank you very much for watching, folks. Bye-bye. Hey, thank you to all the June patrons who support these videos through July and early August, and especially these Mike Check supporters. We've got Steven Stagger again, and Michael McClintock again, and Kale the Quick again. Lots of agains. Drazion, Adjective, Jason Yanity, Wes Ovenbeving, Craig Mortel, Neil Blakey Milner, Speedy Savant, Valiant Cake Fiend, Aaron Toyvson, Marius Fieldvold, Jan Torre Vel, Ole Peter Talgo, Julien Auger Lafont, Petrie Michaela, and absolutely everyone who has watched, shared, favorited, and subscribed. Thanks for continuing to make this a reality, and I'll see you next time.